decide. And there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Chrystia Freeland is talking about how the CPP needs to talk with all the finance ministers across the country because of Alberta's dangerous idea of managing its own money. How dare you, Alberta? Here's Chrystia Freeland. It's very quick. Very, very quick. Here we go.
Let me confirm that this Friday, I will be convening a special meeting of provincial and territorial finance ministers to discuss the Government of Alberta's proposed withdrawal from the Canada Pension Plan. Let me confirm.
So there you go. They're going to have a meeting about it. And that's all she's going to say. There isn't any more. You could look at the whole meeting here. I looked for kind of more context, even the question, and I just ran out of time. And this morning, I'm very, very late and I'm very busy. So I'm trying to not rush through it, but I started one already and I messed something up and I had to restart, blah, blah, blah. Things happen. Life's crazy, but we got to keep our eye on the prize here today. Larry Brock is talking about SNC Lavalin. He's really good. He was talking to the app, the ArriveCan scam app, whistleblower guys, and he was great with that. This is an interesting back and forth with the SNC Lavalin lawyer, and spoiler alert, he doesn't answer any questions, but I think it's interesting to watch the exercise. The point isn't to get the question answered necessarily. The point is to illustrate how not transparent this government is. Here we go, especially with its criminality. Here we go.
Mr. Livingstone, why did the government refuse the RCMP's request for a full waiver of cabinet confidences?
I'm not in a position to answer that question.
Do you have an answer you just cannot respond to?
No, I don't have an answer to that question.
Did you counsel the outcome?
I can't answer that question. That's privileged information.
What position did you advise the government to take?
I can't answer that question.
Mr. Livingstone, who ultimately, if you can't answer the question, is there any other individual who was providing instructions to the question I just put to you?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Were you part of a team that gave advice to the government with respect to that request from the RCMP?
I can't speak to any advice that I provided.
That wasn't the question. Were you part of a team of lawyers, of senior counsel, senior lawyers who were tasked with the responsibility of advising the government on that position to take with respect to that request? Were you part of a team?
I believe that's still an area of privilege. I can't answer that question.
I do not recall. And a point of order gets called immediately after that. So here's Garnet Genius. He is asking this gentleman, and I can't remember his name. Hold on a second. This guy here. Oh, it doesn't. I was going to cheat because usually it's got their name underneath, but he doesn't have his name. Andy Lee says, conservative Garnet Genius in committee questioning ArriveCan contractor David Yo. Oh, that's his name. There you go. President of Dalian Enterprises. Now, what Dalian Enterprises does is takes a government contract and then project manages it. And the project management is basically finding an actual contractor to do it. Why can't the Canadian government find an actual contractor to do it and vet the contractor themselves? You got me. Great question. I'm not sure. Why is this guy great at what he does? And why does he manage billions of dollars worth of government contracts to hand out to people that he likes? Why? Is there any kind of oversight for a company that he runs that does that? That's all his company does. That's what the point of this whole interaction is. Garnet Genius is asking him, what does your company do? And he says, the company project manages, quarterbacks these projects for the government. And he said, right, but if I'm the government and I hand you a project and you quarterback this, what does that look like? What do you actually do? And he kind of is confused and he's like, well, handing out the contracts, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't really answer the questions. He's talking about how he's a high level exec managing the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting back and forth. It's 5 minutes. Link is in the description if you're interested in it. But there's a lot of shenanigans going on. Shenanigans is the official term for that, by the way. Shenanigans going on with regards to government contracts and who's administering the contracts. So it looks like the government's administering the contract, but it's giving it to a in-between guy, like a third-party in-between guy. And the in-between guy now has a whole bunch of power, right? He's got like all these government contracts stacked up, right? How many government contracts do you want? Oh, I've run over budget on this one. I've got to call my money guy, right? So like, it seems very crony, insidery, and like it cuts out a lot of people who would benefit from being able to, genuinely deliver a service to the government without having to know that this insider is the one handing out the contracts, right? So It's very, very interesting to think
So he admits
how much of our government is structured around these backroom or like one layer deep shrouds. Because you come in there and you say, I'd like to look at your books. You've got all these government contracts. I'd like to look at your books. Well, that's proprietary. We can't talk about that. I can't remember that. Of course, the government is saying that too. The government's lawyer is saying that too. So, right. There's all sorts of, I do not recall, and I can't answer that question. That's privileged. Thank you very much. Don't they all work for the Canadian taxpayer? Don't they work for like me? Right? That's privileged. Yeah. And I'm asking. You'll tell me now, or I'll find somebody who will. You're now you're fired, and now you're first in charge. But usually with the trope, you kill that guy. But I mean, in this situation, you can't kill them, obviously. You could remove them from power. Now you tell me, right? And Trudeau came to power promising to be the guy to tell you, because he said transparency. He said Harper's government is not transparent. And we proverbially killed that guy and said, all right, you show us. And then Justin Trudeau got in there and declared the Emergencies Act, and well, the rest is history. Here is Canada Proud. Here is the back and forth talking about how Justin Trudeau wants the carbon tax to increase and Poilievre doesn't, and we should run an election on that. What do you think? Justin Trudeau says outright, you'll lose another election if you don't have a carbon tax, to Poilievre. And I don't know that Justin Trudeau would win an election this time. The polls say he wouldn't, but who knows? The same policies would be enacted regardless of Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre. I hope I'm wrong about that. Here's Mr. Speaker Fergus.
So he admits that natural gas is cleaner and lower emitting, and that's exactly why he's going to penalize Canadians for using it. Mr. Speaker, he says he wants to bring in a pause for some people in some places. I want to get rid of the tax for all people in all places and forever. But wait, why don't we let Canadians decide? Why doesn't the Prime Minister pause the tax across the country until Canadians go to the polls so we can have a carbon tax election and Canadians can choose his plan to quadruple the tax or my plan to axe the tax?
It is amazing to me that after 3 failed elections in a row by the Conservatives, they still want to fight another election on denying climate change, on denying the costs of climate change. After the summer we've had, they continue to say no plan against climate change is what's good for Canadians, good for our economy, good for businesses. They are wrong, and Canadians are going to show them that once again.
So I just don't think so. And I said Speaker Fergus, but it went right to Pierre Poilievre. I thought the speaker was going to introduce the leader of the opposition. Anyway, it doesn't matter. No talks about this as well. He says Poilievre asks Trudeau today to call an election on the carbon tax. Trudeau responds, Tories will lose again. Poilievre signals to bring it on. Apparently there's a gif there, and Poilievre is saying, doing the Morpheus kind of thing. It's not really Morpheus, but a little bit. Here is Cian Bexton. He's sharing this of Philip Champagne, and he says, Canada's Minister of Natural Resources on the Liberal carbon tax. Unless there is a change of saving Liberal seats in the area, there will be no more carve-outs coming. So here's that.
The carbon tax actually works. Why would you not just increase the rural rebate significantly rather than exempting heating oil? Because you're sending two conflicting incentives. You're sending two conflicting signals. You are removing any fee.
No, we
on
are
the
pausing.
highest
We are pausing
for 3 years.
And during that period of time, we will be working with folks to actually ensure that they can install heat pumps to address the long-term affordability issues and to address the
So
climate
can
change.
you clarity,
numbers.
the clarity then say, is this, are there no more carve-outs coming?
There will be no more carpets coming.
I was looking.
So there you go. It's interesting because Poilievre is setting his sights to try and define what the next election will be based on this tax. And he's not wrong. The tax will come back after the next election. And so he can certainly campaign on that, and he will. It's interesting because usually Trudeau's the one setting the tone for the election. And in this situation, Poilievre has shamed him, attacked him at multiple vectors, and he's pushing for an election that he's running the reasoning behind it rather than Trudeau running the reasoning behind it. So it's an interesting strategy shift from the Conservatives, and a welcome one, because at least they're in the fricking game for once. Usually they barely have their memes and their videos on point, right? At this point in time, Poilievre has actually wielded the Conservative Party and wielded it in a way that it's actually effective at communicating a message that is coherent somewhat, right? And that's leaps and bounds better than Aaron O'Toole. What was his message? Andrew Scheer, what was his message? Drink milk? Like, I don't think so, right? So I'm not a fan of the Conservative Party, but it seems that Pierre Poilievre understands how to wield a political machine, and he is doing so better than any I've seen. Did Stephen Harper wield a propaganda machine, a political machine this way? I honestly, I don't think I remember well enough to comment on it properly. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I'd have to look. Anyway, back to this. Lori Goldstein says, program note, heat pumps cannot replace a furnace in most parts of Canada. Most experts feel once the temperature drops below -15, the warmth circulated by a heat pump is not enough. Heat pumps can work well in conjunction with a furnace. And also, the furnace just works just fine. I don't need the heat pump. Thank you very much. It's just a waste. Here's Danielle Smith. She says, unfathomable. Rachel Notley's NDP just stood up in the legislature and voted to keep the carbon tax and continue supporting Justin Trudeau's unfair treatment of our province. United Conservatives team will continue to fight for an end to the carbon tax. Yeah. I mean, really, Rachel Notley? Really? You hate Alberta that much? Okay. All right. Here's Toronto Star. They're reporting this. Canada's immigration planning will now take into account housing, health, and infrastructure, the minister says. Now we will? Now? Just now? Not the last 3 years. No, but now, because we have to. Mark Miller. I've got a video of him a little bit later, I think, where he's a prime D-bag. CTV News is reporting high numbers of immigrants are choosing to leave Canada for greener pastures. Study. Yeah, click on the image below to read more. People are coming here and they're saying rent is how much? And they're leaving. Why? Because rent is how much? Seriously, people are not interested in saving for 25 years to buy a condo, on the 4th floor of a high-rise condo in a condo block in Toronto. They're just not interested in that. They don't want to do that. They'd much rather spend a quarter of that in a paradise area that has its own bananas, right? Like, holy smoke. Christia Freeland says, our paradise is different for everyone, but I'm talking more like closer to the equator, on maybe an island close to a beach where bananas just grow, or oranges or whatever, right? Like you could make something out of that much easier than you could make something out of, 800 square feet. 800 square feet. That's pretty big these days for a condo, right? 700 square feet in downtown Toronto, probably, right? And you could probably get more in the island nation than you can here. So I'm just saying, if it's all the same to a brand new immigrant, you might as well roll the dice and go somewhere nice, right? Like, anyway, Christia Freeland's talking about this. She says, our economic plan is building more homes faster, and we're making it easier for Canadians to save for a down payment. No, the only way to address this problem is to deal with the demand side, because you can't increase the supply side enough to even come close to meeting the demand when you're bringing in 1 million people a year for immigration, for whatever reason you're bringing them in. It doesn't really matter. You can't build enough houses, period. You don't have the labor and you don't have the material. And I've diatribed on this yesterday, but it's still true. And they're still trying to convince people that if we ignore this enough, we can build enough houses to meet the demand. You can't. They're so far away from it, it's not even funny. They're as far away from meeting the demand by increasing the supply that they're about as far away as regular Canadians are at saving for $1 million first home, because, that's how much houses cost these days. Anyway, she continues. Since we introduced the new tax-free first home savings account, more than 250,000 Canadians have opened theirs, including more than 100,000 in October alone. Right, sure, it's definitely going to help. Tax-free savings. The taxes should not be levied on the citizens. The taxes should be levied on foreign countries that want to trade with your citizens. You have a business, you want to export something to Canada, you've got feta cheese you want to send over here. Great. Wonderful. You'll pay a little tax and you'll access the market, and it'll be great. There's a structure there we could work with, right? The citizens get things, the government builds things with the taxes it collects for the betterment of the citizens. Everybody's happy. We can develop things. We could have our own oil and gas companies. There's so many things we could do in Canada to make it better here, and we choose not to. It's terrible. And there's no political will, and there's nobody communicating, like the Conservative Party now communicating an idea coherently. There's nobody communicating an idea coherently. Like, we can actually fix this and make it really great. Instead, people are saying, racist, blah, 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 blah. It's garbage. It's such nonsense. Anyway, Lori Goldstein says, why it's getting harder for Doug Ford to sidestep the blame for the Greenbelt scandal. More evidence emerges the Premier's office in picking properties for development. I don't care. It seems like a witch hunt. If Justin Trudeau gets knocked on the door, Mr. Trudeau, we'd like to see this paperwork, please. And he says, no. And they say, oh, you're right, sir. We'll see you later. Investigation over. I'm pretty sure that this is a whole bunch of nonsense. I'd love to see the Justin Trudeau criminal investigation completed before the Doug Ford land thing criminal investigation completed. I'd like to see the Liberals investigation completed. The McGuinty Liberals, the gas plant scandal, the destroyed paperwork. Wasn't good old Gerald Butts involved in that whole group of people, that merry band of misfits, right? I'd love all of those, but those police investigations didn't go anywhere. This police investigation, oh my gosh, it's Doug Ford and he's everybody's favorite bad guy. I think that maybe he's not conservative. I think the time is ripe for a conservative party, and not New Blue, but a conservative party in Ontario. But Doug Ford being pilloried for this land thing, it looks to me like a distraction, has nothing to do with anything real, has everything to do with pushing people to hate Doug Ford even more. So just because they want Del Duca to be the next Premier of Ontario. Oh, what a nightmare. Andrea Horvath, even worse. Pierre Poilievre again says she's dreaming and you're paying. And this is Chrystia Freeland. And it's funny because she's talking about the dream of home ownership in Ontario. And then she catches herself and she's like, and the reality, you could tell. Well, see if you can hear it in her voice when she says it. Here we go. You can see it in her eye.
The dream and the reality. First home ownership is alive and well in Canada.
63% of those not already in the market have given up on ever owning a home. Toronto residents tell us they doubt they'll ever be able to break into the market.
Do you think you'll ever be able to buy a house?
No, I think going forward it will be difficult for me.
Is it your goal to someday own a home?
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's not going really well, but one can dream, I guess.
The dream and the reality.
Her eyes when she says the reality. The reality, yes, the dream and the reality too. Sure, Chrystia. We believe you, Baba Freeland. CBC Watcher is pointing this out. Let's talk about the Coutts trial and the Tamara Litch trial. There are crazy, crazy things happening. Crazy things like people breaking into Liberal offices, like Maya Menzies and Chrystia Freeland and Lloyd Longfield, my MP as well. People came into their offices, and Maya says, we're locked down inside Chrystia Freeland's office calling for our MPs to act on ending the genocide in Gaza. Join us as we sit in with tens of lockdowns coast to coast, rally at Spadina and Bloor right now. So they're having a rally in support of this. Can you imagine? Where are the horses? Where are the men that come in and arrest these people? Heather says, how did they get in? There's no security or buzzer or locked door. That's weird. 17 MPs' offices were occupied. Nobody alerted anyone to lock their doors, 911. Or was this a planned and coordinated attack on our parliamentarians and staff? Where were the staff? Were they held hostage? That's a good question. No, just continue working. Pretend like the protesters aren't here. Would that have gone well? The trucking protest guys never went in and took over offices, but Tamara Litch and Chris Barber are in a farce of a trial that is going to take longer than the whole Freedom Convoy took from its entirety anyway, including the driving. Here's CBC Watcher, and he says, Lawrence Greenspan, I've done murder trials, other far more serious criminal cases. The amount of energy and resources being put into this, we're going to have the Freedom Convoy trial lasting longer than the Freedom Convoy itself. And it's a farce. And it's a farce because if these were Canadians demanding that Chrystia Freeland resign and be replaced by somebody who's patriotic and puts Canada first, they'd be arrested, every single one of them, and their bank accounts frozen, right? And maybe trampled with horses just for good measure, right? So it's pretty interesting when you can protest for Gaza, you can protest for Israel, or against Israel, I suppose, in this situation. But you can't protest for Canada. You can't protest for your own freedoms, right? Here's a quick Mocha update from the Coots 4. He says, today, both defense and the Crown are submitting arguments to the judge on whether or not the envelope can be submitted as evidence. Family and friends of the men believe that the communication in the envelope are of vital importance that could aid the four men's case. While some think that the decision of the judge to allow arguments is a step in the right direction, some see it as not a step at all, as the four men have been under pretrial custody for more than 620 days in remand. The hearing taking place today is closed to the public. Only the Crown and defense are allowed to be present as they submit arguments on whether or not the envelope can be used as evidence. Whereas tomorrow, the pretrial that was adjourned until in July will continue. Unfortunately, due to publication bans, I cannot report further details surrounding the case. Video below is from October 18th. So pretty wild stuff going on with that. It's a complete miscarriage of justice. It has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with punishing some poor people who the government can blame and I guess not have too much of a blowback or something to that effect. But it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying what they're able to get. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful